Give your little one the gift of reading with a copy of Tye The Dreamer, a delightful story of a lovable, brilliant daddy's girl and her cuddly, adorable cat. Tye The Dreamer teaches kids to achieve ambitious dreams, supported by loving fathers and strong communities. Available online at itascabooks.com. That's ITASCA books.com. Tye The Dreamer is a perfect gift. Dream big with Tye The Dreamer.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Today's episode will feature an interview from another podcast I am working on called the Business of Creativity Podcast. The podcast highlights creativity in business, leadership, management, and entrepreneurship. Today's guest is Matt Roberts. Matt is the founder and CEO of Driving Company, which is the umbrella company for D1 Ticker. Take a listen. Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the Business of Creativity Podcast, where we highlight creativity in business, leadership, management, and entrepreneurship. Our guest today is Matt Roberts. Matt is the founder and CEO of Driving Company. Greetings, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
What's going on, Ty? Always good to be with you.
Yes, sir. Driving Company, been around since 2013. Your background: played college baseball, spent 5 years working in college athletics, then branched off into entrepreneurship. For those who don't know, for those who listen to this who aren't affiliated with college athletics, Driving Company, their primary product or service they provide is an email called D1 Ticker, which is an email that goes out 7 days a week. I believe it's 12 times a week, right, Matt?
That's right.
12 times a week, which educates people who work in college athletics about all the relevant information that happened the day prior. And most people I know find it as an excellent resource. Did I describe that correctly?
Right. It's the key business developments of the industry every single day. The only day we take off is Christmas. And so over time, which we'll talk more about this, if we've won, which you never really want to say you've won because that feels like bad karma a little bit, right? But if we've won,
right,
it's because we've built trust through consistency. And we have a great team and a well-oiled content curation process, and distill that information down into really bite-sized chunks for leaders so they can thumb through that email in 7 minutes every morning over coffee, or at the end of their day when they finally get a chance to breathe and have a good sense of the business developments that occurred across that news cycle. And as you know, our industry is evolving very, very quickly. So this is really important stuff for them to keep abreast of.
Yeah. And what's interesting about it now, there are plenty of organizations and companies that send out emails every day, but those emails are just aggregators. They find the headlines that tie to college athletics and send you an email with all the headlines, right? What makes D1 Ticker unique is that this stuff has been basically vetted by a number of eyes who understand what's important to college athletics, right?
Two parts to that, correct. Two parts. One, myself and others on our team in aggregate have spent over 40 years in college athletics. I mean, inside athletic departments, right?
Yes, sir.
So and at the C-suite level. So there's a really keen understanding of what matters. And so the filtering of static and getting static out of the line,
right,
so that leaders can, again, consume the really critical information on every news cycle is important. So that's part one. And then part two is we're not just sending a link and we're not just sending you the full article. We are taking that piece of content and saying to ourselves, and this is our wonderful writing team, what are the 3 or 4 most important points that need to be distilled from this piece of content and repackaged in a way that, again, creates efficiencies. You started this off with Driving Company.
Yes, sir.
What Driving Company's mission is to make the lives of decision makers in college athletics easier. And so that easier, as it pertains to our flagship publication, D1 Ticker, is saving them time, because time in any business endeavor is money, and certainly for folks who are making critical decisions every day, they have a limited amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Make the lives of decision makers in college athletics easier, right? The reason
Bingo.
why we exist. You talk about purpose.
That's right.
And thinking about this, 2013 was about 11 years ago. I mean, if you work in a college athletics department and you're not the boss, part of your job is to make the life of the decision maker easier, right? so they can make the executive decisions. But tell me about A, how the idea for the company was founded, and then B, when that purpose actually was established for what the business was about.
So I was the first user of the publication. I spent virtually all of my time in college athletics working for Bill McGillis, who recently retired as the athletic director at the University of San Diego, previously AD at Southern Miss. I worked for Bill at University of South Florida when he was the deputy AD, and then prior to that, he was the AD at the University of Evansville in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And Bill is a voracious consumer. I mean, he wants to consume as much as possible. And my unfair advantage, Tye, in building D1 Ticker to start was I did this for Bill, and Doug Woolard was the AD at USF during my time in Tampa as well. I did this for them daggone near every day. And there used to be a service in the marketplace that would send C-suite decision makers 200 emails a day, the entire body of an article. I'm being very literal here, 200 emails a day. Well, the right content's in there somewhere, but the delivery methodology wasn't spot on, right? Mm-hmm. And so come 2013, Twitter's really starting to grow. So pinpointing and finding targeted content became much easier. LexisNexis, which is still, of course, a massive academic database of news sources. LexisNexis was a key source. Google is we don't need to talk about how powerful Google is, but
right.
Finding the right content became much easier in the early 2010s because of technology. And then again, we pushed it through that lens of what was important, and then we distill it down in a writing method that has proven out to be successful. But what's also key here is from 2013 until 2017, it was a side hustle. And I was building other businesses at the time in other industries that served as learning opportunities that have contributed to driving company over the years. But for so long, it really was a side hustle. And I'd be up with a couple of other teammates at 4 a.m. putting the email together. We only sent once per day back then on weekdays. And I think part of our founding story is we weren't trying to optimize right from the giddy up. And it's not to disparage companies that need to do that. And there's tons of startups that we both could identify that have nailed it, and they got funding or they bootstrapped it. And I was just always working on other projects, but I was still just passionately interested in what was going on in college athletics. And so the process of curation for me personally is what I would do even if we hadn't created D1 Ticker.
Right.
But there was a product very similar in nature called Launch Ticker out of the Bay Area. Jason Calacanis, very well-known entrepreneur and angel investor. He had started Launch, and Launch is still out there today, maybe in a different form, but they were covering literally launches of new companies and the development of new companies in the Bay Area in a manner very similar to how we do D1 Ticker. And it's just one of those, like the light bulb went off, like, man, I have this lens of understanding what's important because I worked directly for an AD for 5 years and didn't have to work in one particular silo, but directly for an AD. And now I see the vision of how you can distill content and deliver it in a really efficient manner to save people lives. So that's really the foundational impotence of how D1 Ticker came to be. But the point about optimization is it wasn't until years later that we thought, oh, we actually got something here. Like, we got 15,000 people reading this every day at an open rate that is really silly. Maybe we need to turn our business eye to how we optimize this product a little more. And so we've had some success doing that, but all of this is just a learning journey, right? Like professional life is a learning exercise. Exactly. It's how fast can you learn and apply what you've learned to improve your team, improve your products, and improve your outputs.
So I have two questions here as you were speaking. Two questions popped up. The first one, in terms of working for Bill McGillis, he said he's a voracious consumer of information. Was that your role to vet the info from these 200 articles?
That's
from
right.
What existed out? So he actually assigned that to you. Like, Matt, I need to know what's going on. I need you to tell me what's important here.
And I would print out the 12 that actually mattered.
Wow.
Right. So I was tactically doing this before we had a product called D1 Ticker.
And how long did that take you? Because what I've seen with D1 Ticker, you guys are up all night or early in the morning, and there's people around the country doing it. How long did it take you to go through information and decide what was relevant for Bill McGillis back then?
Yeah, it was probably an unstructured but effective mental model of what schools being reported on, because some schools you could sort of eliminate from the conscious because they, had nothing to do with Evansville or USF, for example. If it's Eastern Washington, okay, I know I can sort of slot it into like probably not Bucket.
Right.
So it was what schools being reported on, how large the financial figures involved within the reporting is, because, naturally the larger, the more importance it sort of something brings. So in that example, Eastern Washington, maybe not, but if Eastern Washington is going to build a new football stadium that's going to run, back then it probably would have been, I don't know, 175 million. Today it'd be, 4 times that. All right, well, maybe it does need to get put on his desk now because the financial figures. So it's these moving metrics. And the third one would be that third probably variable would be, really understanding his own personal lens to the industry. And maybe it's an AD he knows well, or maybe it's, and for Bill, he's from Seattle. So Eastern Washington, he might want to know everything about Eastern Washington because he's from Pacific Northwest, right? So it was those moving meters that over time you just go. And so then I would take the 12 articles that I'd go, that this seems relevant. And I'd just put them on his desk. And let me tell you, like, the next day, like, hey, I heard about such and such probably else. Why didn't you put that article? And so then you're recalling. That's the fourth variable is like, but he's giving you feedback into what's important to him. And so you're putting that into the mental model. And, over the course of weeks and months, this thing just gets honed very quickly because this was an everyday thing.
Yeah. So there's an aspect of that of successful businesses that are created, find a problem to solve and provide solutions for a problem. So at some point you figured, what I'm doing here is solving this problem for a person who's in a leadership chair that wants to know what's relevant in the industry, and I'm providing a solution for that. So at some point you went from that to creating an actual business that provided that solution for the industry. Tell me about, there's a gap in there about that period of say, this is an excellent idea. Let me just go forth with it.
So the one obvious variable that I just described about Bill personally that's not in place in D1 Ticker is, we don't take into account the personal proclivities of every single individual subscriber, right? So that is the one big difference here. However, in 16, 17, when that light bulb went on, and one of the real key influences early on in D1 Ticker is a guy named Roger Gardner, who was the longtime chief communications officer, and he filled a number of roles at Learfield. He was like in Learfield's initial, founding team way back when. And Roger probably called 6 months into D1 Ticker and said like, hey, I think you have something here.
Okay.
Can we talk? And I remember saying to him like, dude, I don't even know if I'm going to want to get up tomorrow and do this. So no, we can't talk about this right now. And so a number more months go by and Roger calls back. He's like, I think you guys are doing a really good job of compiling the key business stuff. And he'd say, I have ADs from the Big 12 or the Big 10 or the SEC saying, hey, thanks for turning me on to D1 Ticker. This is really good. And so having somebody like Roger with his foresight, because of his experience of what this could be, was really helpful. And then having a brand like Learfield be the first paying advertiser just starts you down this road of legitimacy that other vendors in our space, if they see Learfield's advertising there, it gives it some brand
credibility and brand. Yeah.
Credibility. That's right. So that was a real key moment that I finally, wised up and called Roger back and said, yeah, okay, let's talk about this. The other one.
Before you continue, there's still something missing. I'm still missing a step. At some point, you went from putting these articles on Bill McGillis's desk to finding all the emails for the key leaders in college athletics and sending that email.
You didn't miss anything there. You didn't miss anything. Okay. The very first email that we started with on January 1st, 2013 was sent to 13 people.
Okay.
Like 13 of my network people.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Like my close friends in the industry. I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this. Tell me what y'all think, and just tell me if it's terrible, right?
Okay.
And of course, when you share something with your own inner circle, they will be honest, brutally honest with you about if it works or not. And so over a course of weeks and months, they would give me feedback, and we'd tweak here and there and tweak here and there.
Okay.
But again, come 2017, we have in one single time in the company's history, Tye, for D1 Ticker, have we done any constructive outbound marketing. Otherwise, the growth has fully been word of mouth.
Yep.
Been organic, right? And that one time we did that outbound marketing was around the same time when we thought, okay, we've got something here. And we had like 200 Division I ADs at the time who were subscribers. And we, it was only probably 3 or 4 of us at the time. And we were like, there's 150 others out there. Why in the world would they not be reading? And we did send that 150 an email and said, hey, 60% of your peers read this every single day. If you want to get it too, just reply yes. And we got like 95 of them in 24 hours.
Okay.
So we went from 200 Division I ADs to 290 to basically 300 Division I ADs like overnight. And that's the only inorganic marketing we've ever done. And again, I think it's just part of that story of trust through consistency, and word of mouth has a far stronger trust factor if you hear about it from your buddy than you getting served an ad on, back then it would have been, I guess, just Facebook to say like, oh, come read this daily newsletter. And newsletters weren't even a thing really back then in widespread business, So, you didn't miss anything there. It's been organic.
It is, but there's an aspect of that there are some concepts of that I have learned about since getting an MBA, right? The network effect, you know what I mean? The psychology of saying, hey, 60% of your peers read this every day and find value in it, right? Is this something you think you can find value in? And then they'd say, okay, well, if this person is reading, and it's like Learfield, like you mentioned with Learfield. Well, if Learfield is connected with this business, then maybe there's something to it. If this person is reading the D1 Ticker, maybe there's something to it. So I think that's excellent in terms of the steps to growth for D1 Ticker, leading to Driving Company. There's another thing I want to ask you about in terms of it not being a primary focus. It took, you said it was about 4 or 5 years before you actually turned your attention and making it the primary thing. Tell me, is that a personality thing, or why did you not think that this thing was the thing initially? Or did you just want to try your hands in a bunch of different businesses?
No, when I left college athletics, it was expressly for this opportunity to work with another mentor of mine, whose name is Aaron Flaker, and building some other businesses in the experiential event space in sports.
Yep.
Which we did and have exited that space a couple times over in the last 12 years. And I think the point about not optimizing from the jump and not having to optimize for the jump, I didn't need to optimize from the jump for my household situation. I didn't need to optimize from the jump for my personal drive. There's that word again. We'll talk about drive.
Yeah, it wasn't an ego feed thing.
No, like it was an experiment. Right. And that's what side hustles start as many times is experiments, and you see if you got something. It just happened to take us much longer to figure out we had something because I was building other businesses. Yeah. But the sort of silver lining and probably the secret there is, I was learning, and these other businesses, we were optimizing from the jump, right? So I was learning a whole different set of skills and practices and strategies in other businesses that eventually would get translated to Driving Company.
Yep.
It just didn't have to all happen at a warp speed, right? Yeah. It like responsibly grew. And even when we did turn our attention to it from a business standpoint, we still use that term all the time, like responsible growth. We're not trying to 10x our business in the next 3 years, like, you would read about in magazines don't exist, but on whatever website,
Fast Company like, or something like that.
Right. Or Wired or something, That's not who we are. All in all, this is a niche industry, a niche business that we are so incredibly committed to. And there's been so many moments over the last 5 to 7 years, people going, why don't you do the same thing in pro sports? If I was trying to optimize the business, I probably would. I'm not trying to optimize the business for pro sports. I am trying to continue to create value on top of value on top of value for the niche of the sports industry that I am most passionate about, and that's college athletics.
100%. The purpose of the organization to make the lives of decision makers in college athletics easier. So if we
Right. Not
branch
sports executives, not sports
exactly
executives, college athletics administrators.
college admin, yeah. So you branch into pro sports, and now it's like we're veering far away from our purpose, right? Now we're trying to do things that we weren't even created to do, which I think is excellent. So let's look at that purpose to make the lives of decision makers in college athletics easier. We talked about the D1 ticker, and of course, there's D2 ticker, D3 ticker, NAIA ticker, right? I've seen you over the last few years create other parts of the business that either are still around or aren't around anymore, right? In terms of this concept of creativity, keep creating, see how we can provide more resources to make the lives of decision makers in college athletics easier. Tell me about how your process of creating, for the lack of a better word, line of business, and then deciding and evaluating if that line of business should continue, right?
So nobody bats 1,000. That's the first statement. And if you think you're going to bat 1,000, you should quit. And if you don't have the balance of understanding that even the best of ideas, once put into the wild, don't work, and that's going to affect how you view your core product, maybe, that's going to compromise you as a leader.
Yep.
And as an ideator too. So we created tickers for every level of college athletics a number of years into the business. And that was all around the value creation theory of, there's 1,100, 1,200 institutions of higher learning who offer athletics. The experience that student athletes derive at the non-D1 schools is just as valuable as the experience derived for the Division I schools. And so if we want to create value for administrators below Division I because we believe in the student athlete experience, which we still do, even though it's sort of crazy today, then we need to create the same sort of value. And value creation has always been clear to me. And that's, again, you're the MBA, Ty, so you would probably laugh at this in some ways. We don't get to value extraction for quite some time within that ideation process. First, it's like, what problem can we solve? And can we solve this problem? Or is somebody else better situated to solve this problem? If we can solve this problem, okay, what sort of resources is that going to take? Is that human capital? Is that, soft cash, hard cash? Do we need partners in the industry? The value creation process, I believe, always has to start there, because if you get your head around the napkin number, the back of the napkin numbers you can write up for any business, you fall in love with a model that doesn't exist until you actually try it, right? And so any of us can go, oh, there's X number of addressable audience. If we can just get X% paying Y, look what that produces. It's not worth the napkin it's written on. It's okay to start thinking through models and test them in conversation with your peers in the industry and with leaders in the industry, but you got to start with value creation. So, right, the other tickers were created, Athletic Director U, which you've been a seminal part of for years and years and years. We thought there was this opportunity to create thought leadership beyond the daily content that comes through the tickers.
Right.
What about the more long-term, sort of like you're doing here, right? Thought leadership around management and culture and org behavior and, heck, creativity. And so, that's been our sister publication for, 7 or 8 years now. A couple recent additions to our portfolio that I'm really excited about: Collegiate Sports Connect, which is a talent management platform that we've built in tandem with WMT and Collegiate Sports Associates, who are both wonderful partners of ours, is trying to reshape how the search and identification of administrative talent is executed. Historically, it's a very passive process, and Connect is positioned to help schools be more proactive in the recruiting, which is sort of ironic, right? Like Nick Saban would have never put a quarterback position open at Alabama on the Rivals message board, right?
Yeah.
Yet historically, that's how talent, to some degree, is sourced in college athletics administratively. We think we can help change that. So there's a couple of others, but the key takeaway, in addition to the value creation focus, is partners. We want to be pretty realistic about the value we can bring to a partnership. And, as elementary as it seems, I believe maybe foolhardily, but wholeheartedly in the 1 + 1 = 3. And so Connect, having some partners involved, We couldn't have done Connect without the other two. D1 Relocation has partners involved. We couldn't do D1 Relocation without others involved. You got to be realistic about who you are and what you're good at. And we're good at distribution. We have great audience. We're really good at keeping an audience engaged over time. And so how can we be additive to a partnership? And the way we can do that, of course, is through, marketing and awareness, because we've got assets that can drive awareness in significant amount.
Yeah. We talk about when you decide to add a branch, right? For the lack of the terminology, when you decide to add a branch of Drive & Co. or partner with somebody, starting with the problem, right? One of the concepts is I think it's part of design thinking, but diverge and converge, right? We sit down and let's talk about all the problems that may exist in all the problems that decision makers in college athletics may face, right? You write down all the problems. Okay, now in this group of brainstorming idea, everybody mark by which problems they think are most relevant, right? So now you have these tick marks or whatever by the problems that everybody thinks are most relevant. Okay, that's your first weeding out process. Okay, now we've take a list of 20 down to a list of 7 or something like that. Now we look at those 7. Okay, now the evaluation process is, of these problems, what do we have the wherewithal to possibly come up with a solution for? You see what I mean? So now you whittle it down to 2 or 3, and then you say, okay, what are some possible solutions for, it's just like you create a big list, make it smaller, create a big list from that small list, make it smaller, and then you come down to 1 or 2 basically problems that you, based on your resources and the wherewithal, could possibly provide solutions for. Sounds like you've done without doing it that formal way.
Well,
right?
But you know what the most important word is?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right. Yep.
And I'm not great at no, because what I love is taking a concept from ideation to like getting it to launch. Like, to me, that's the most fun part of business building.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've probably spent a bunch of money, but you haven't made a dollar yet.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's where you have, and I've been really fortunate to have some people on our team around me who, like we talk about going through a season of no and saying no, because we need to be incredibly focused on our current initiatives.
Yep.
Right. And as soon as you are saying yes to something else, you are then saying no to something else within your portfolio, unless you're being diligent, adding the right human capital to make up for that. But no is a really important word. And I am the king of whiteboard explorations. And I love to go through those exercises, right. But no is really, really important.
It is. So tell me about the evaluation process, because you may create something that is providing solutions. It's very creative, and it potentially could provide value to the audience, but it's not utilized a bunch. So now how do you evaluate whether or not this is something that Drive & Company wants to continue with? Do you look at financial return on investment, or at some point it becomes a business decision, right? You go from creating value to, okay, this is a business decision. Do we need to keep doing this?
I guess let me answer that in the most recent paradigm of how we've thought about that. And that centers around how much additional potential growth there is within our current portfolio, and how easy or difficult we think that growth within our current portfolio can be achieved. And so, for example, there are some within our portfolio, some companies and then some publications that we think can generate a lot more returns by doing more of what we're doing now. And so that would be, the pretty popularized but accurate Jim Collins hedgehog concept. Be the best at what you're the best at and stay really focused on that. So it's that versus, okay, have we exhausted the internal growth opportunities of our current portfolio? And if we're trending towards, we don't know how much more growth how much more juice there is to squeeze out of here, I think that would make us more likely to be interested in redeploying capital into a new endeavor, as opposed to redeploying capital into growing what we already know is working.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I'll ask the last question here and then we'll wrap. What I found for the most part, and it's not 100%, is that leaders in business, leaders in organizations, people who are just leaders in general that read or educate themselves usually have a base book, right? And I say base book meaning like for some reason at some point they read this book and it kind of transformed their thought process on either leadership or business or something like that, or just how they operate. For me, there's two books. One was The Godfather, right? Because it talks about just the point of The Godfather was relationships, right? I know this person, somebody comes to me for a favor. I'm going to go to this other person because they owe me a favor from another favor that I execute. You know what I mean? And now we have this network of relationships. The other one is How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Dale Carnegie, yeah. Right. And so to me, that leads to this curiosity about people, of getting people to talk about themselves, asking questions and things like that. So for you, you just mentioned Jim Collins, and I know for sure what your base book is. If you could tell us your base book and why that book was, I guess, for lack of a better word, transformational for you.
It is Good to Great. And if I could go a little broader, it's the whole series along with Good to Great, Built to Last, and all of those. The reason Good to Great was so impactful for me, baseball has a lot of statistics involved with it, right? I mean, now there's all these new age statistics of what you see on ESPN of, on base plus slugging is now so valued, for example. But I think I was heavily influenced by the sport of baseball and the data surrounding how performance is measured. And so when I first read Good to Great in grad school, this is 04, 05, I'm going, oh my gosh, somebody has now analyzed in an empirical fashion how you achieve business results, multiple standard deviations better than your peer group. And these are publicly traded companies, very, very, quite honestly, very different than the small company we have today. But the principles, I think, were the same. And there are parts of Good to Great that speak to me in a way that I know I don't lead. For example, one of the findings was there's no empirical evidence that charismatic leadership makes any difference.
Right.
And generally, I would categorize myself as a charismatic leader. And so there are times, you're trying to extrapolate one situation and one very small company in the grand scheme of things to this whole body of research that was done on these multi-billion-dollar companies in these multi-billion-dollar trillion-dollar industries, even back when they did the study in the 90s. But again, it was that connection between tangible empirical data and output. And, it's sort of similar to, there's this very popular Harvard Business study that, again, empirically illustrated that diverse leadership teams produce better results for the company. And here we are in 2024, and we're still having this debate around not debate, it is a real challenge around creating diverse teams. And I just sit here sometimes and go, even as a white male, that look at the data.
Yeah, what does the data say?
What's the data say? So to answer your question directly, it was the introduction, and I'm sure there were other studies out there that I just wasn't exposed to, but I was exposed to Good to Great and immediately latched onto it because of the empirical data and the rigorous analysis that was applied to all these different companies to spit out, they looked at thousands of publicly traded companies and they spit out 14 that's so over-indexed in their industries. And then they talked about the findings. If I could only read one business book the rest of my life, it would be Good to Great, which I read way more than that, of course. But if it was just one, give me Good to Great and I might be able to eke out a living somehow.
That's funny. You sound like me reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like I'm just read that every 4 or 5 years just to make sure I'm doing things right. Well, Matt, this has been an excellent conversation. I, along with the rest of the people who work in college athletics, I'm sure now, this is an assumption here, but really appreciate the work you've done with Driving Company and D1 Ticker. And I really appreciate you joining us here on the Business of Creativity podcast.
Appreciate you, Ty.
Yes, sir. That was Matt Roberts. Matt is the founder and CEO of Driving Company. Of course, I'm Ty Brown with Business of Creativity podcast. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than we are today.